Hello, everyone. My name is Kaitlin Newhouse, and I'm really pleased to share with you a portion of my dissertation research, which I completed last spring at UCLA, that used the 2018 CERU dataset. It's titled Race and Class in the College Classroom, Faculty Interactions and Student Learning Among Racially Diverse Poor and Working Class Collegians. By way of a little bit of positionality, I myself was a working class college student, first generation as well, who was admitted to a research university and found that experience really amazing and really baffling. And faculty were really integral. And so that really drew me to wanting to study this topic. Particularly because there's been lots of work done to try to explain why it is that outcomes for low-income students like me are poorer generally. And we know low-income students experience really unique struggles while in college. They often grapple with family responsibilities, one or more jobs. They may not be able to afford to live on campus. They may be the first in their family to attend college. And so there's a wide variety of circumstances that amount to low-income students having a qualitatively different kind of college experience, which likely explains different outcomes. But we also know that faculty can serve as really important sources of support and agents of socialization, and that was certainly the case for me. They can demystify academic culture and connect low-income students to valuable resources they may not be aware of. And faculty are particularly important when it comes to students' learning and cognitive skills development, things like reading and writing and critical thinking. But evidence suggests that poor and working class students tend to interact with faculty less frequently and less meaningfully than wealthier students do. And so what I wanted to do with my dissertation was to use structural equation modeling to explore the extent to which more frequent student-faculty interaction portended to higher self-rated cognitive skills. To do that, my dissertation answered 3 research questions, but for the sake of time today, we'll just focus on the last 2. So the second question really sought to test this mediation hypothesis to see if interacting with faculty explained some of the relationship between poor and working class students' background characteristics and their self-rated cognitive skills. And then the third question wanted to explore whether the mediation hypothesis suggested in RQ2 holds across racial ethnic subgroups of poor and working class students. And so this involved using structural equation modeling to test a model on all poor and working class respondents to the CERU survey, and then on testing the same model on racial ethnic subsamples. So no surprise here, I used the 2018 Student Experience in the Research University survey. There on the right are the 19 institutions that participated that year. And across these 19 institutions, average response rate was about 27.4%. And that ranged from about 10% to about 40%. And this resulted in 118,552 respondents that year. So from the CERU data and informed by Pascarella's general model of assessing change, Bourdieu's theory of capital, and the broader body of literature on student-faculty interaction, I developed the following hypothesized model, which is what I tested. So as you can see, this model suggests that student background characteristics predict more or less interaction with faculty, and then that those faculty interactions predict student self-rated cognitive skills both directly and indirectly. So I tested this model 5 times. Once on all poor and working class students, I refer to that as the Omnibus model. And then once on poor and working class Asian and Asian American students, once on a sample of poor and working class Black students, a sample of poor and working class Latinx students, and a sample of poor and working class white students. Just by way of a couple of data points here, these were the variables I used for student-faculty interaction and for cognitive skills. And so you can see here, strong factor loading, strong reliability. I want to note that the cognitive skills variables on the CERU survey are self-rated by the students. They indicate very poor or all the way to excellent on these items. And they're also asked to rate their cognitive skills currently, and then to retrospectively rate those cognitive skills when they got to college. And so these are not cognitive skills assessments. I want to be really clear about that. And there are some limitations there, but they are measures of students' perceptions of their own learning, which can still be really useful. So as I mentioned, the 2018 survey had about 118,000 respondents. I narrowed that down only to respondents who indicated that they were low income or poor or working class on the social class item of the survey. And you can see that got me to about 30,000 or so respondents, just over. And some descriptive characteristics of that sample is shown here on the right. And so getting into the results, I'm going to show you a lot of structural equation models today. And so I'm going to try to be quick. I can't go through every single finding, but I'll show you some good takeaways. And I'll try to sort of communicate what those takeaways are before I show you what they look like in the model. So first and foremost, overall, I found that interacting with faculty did positively portend to higher self-rated cognitive skills, both directly and indirectly by way of academic effort and positive perceptions of campus racial climate. And most importantly, this finding held in the model of all poor and working class students and across all racial ethnic models. So you can see here, this is what the final model looked like of all poor and working class students. Fit statistics are there at the top, and all paths were significant unless indicated by a dotted line. And so there's the relationship we wanted to see, right? Strong positive relationship, but directly from student-faculty interaction to student self-rated cognitive skills presently. And also an indirect relationship, suggesting that the more students interact with faculty, the more likely they were to increase their academic effort, which then increased their cognitive skills. And then also that the more students interacted with faculty, the more positively they perceived the campus racial climate, which then also had a positive relationship with their self-assessed cognitive skills. And as you can see, this is the model for Asian American students. This relationship holds, right? Same pattern seen here. The model of poor and working class Black and African American students, same pattern seen here. Model of Latinx poor and working class students, same pattern here. And finally, the model of white students, same pattern. And so this is really encouraging to see that interacting with faculty benefits poor and working class students' self-rated cognitive skills, both in the aggregate and across racial ethnic groups. And so because that's the case, the question sort of for me then became, what are the identities and experiences that portended to students interacting with faculty if it is the case that it's so beneficial for them? And from there, I found that frequent interaction with faculty was not uniformly distributed across poor and working class students. So there were certain social identities that were associated with more or less frequent interaction with faculty. And there were differences in the racial ethnic submodels in which of those identities were more or less salient. So I'll give you some examples here. In the Omnibus model, so all poor and working class students, we can see here that women tended to interact with faculty significantly less frequently than did poor and working class men. And there's no direct relationship from gender to students' cognitive skills. So in this model, interacting with faculty completely explains the relationship between gender and cognitive skills. This is kind of interesting, particularly given that in the broader body of student-faculty interaction literature, women tend to interact with faculty more frequently than do men. However, when I broke this out by the racial ethnic submodels, what I ended up finding was that this relationship was only significant among poor and working class students of color. So among Latinx, Asian American students, and Black students. There was no significant relationship between gender and interacting with faculty among poor and working class white students, pointing particularly to students who we might focus initiatives on, right? Poor and working class women of color might especially benefit. In the Omnibus model, I included race, of course. These variables don't appear in the racial ethnic submodels, but just quickly here, Latinx and Asian American students tended to interact with faculty less frequently than did white students, whereas Black students tended to interact with faculty more frequently. These are patterns that are sort of borne out in the broader student-faculty interaction literature, but in the dissertation, I went into a little bit more descriptive detail of the different types of interactions that students are engaging in more or less by race, and there were some pretty interesting differences there, and I'm happy to get into that during Q&A. There were some major differences as well, academic majors. So for example, these are relative to social science majors. So business majors and arts and humanities majors tended to interact with faculty a lot more frequently than social science majors, whereas STEM majors interacted with faculty a lot less frequently. I think a lot of this has to do with some of the pedagogical practices in these different fields and disciplines, but it's important to note that these relationships held across all the racial ethnic submodels. So this was true for students in the Omnibus model as well as in the submodels. And then also two variables that held across models were hours per week spent working and whether or not students were transfer students, which was positively associated with more frequent student-faculty interaction. So these were variables that were positively associated regardless of students' race or ethnicity. So getting into some implications for practice, given that my dissertation found that more interaction with faculty portended to greater assessments of cognitive skills, how do we cultivate more interaction? Well, prior literature talks a lot about accessibility cues, right? These implicit and explicit ways that faculty signal to students that they are open to more engagement and to interacting. And so these are things like taking time to incorporate student questions and discussion in class, allowing for student questions to steer the direction, asking students for examples and ideas, and then demonstrating interest when students share those examples and ideas, and being flexible in your course policies to accommodate student needs to a certain extent. And faculty might also consider how they can unmask the hidden curriculum for poor and working class students. So be really explicit about what is the function and the role of office hours. What would we do when I got there? Maybe communicate email and communication norms between students and faculty. Talk with students about the function and applicability of departmental and campus resources to them. Another implication for practice is more IR research based, but I think this study really shows the importance of looking at class and race and ethnicity and looking at those things at the same time, and that really unique insights can be gained by doing so. And leveraging data and insights to design targeted initiatives or train faculty and staff to pay attention to and reach out to specific students who could benefit most. So in this case, poor and working class women of color, first generation students, STEM majors would be really more efficient and cost effective than designing initiatives for all first gen students, for example, or all poor and working class students. And then finally, to the extent possible, I think institutions might address some of the disparities in cultural capital with financial capital. So maybe aim to provide opportunities that facilitate student faculty interaction that are paid. So poor and working class students in my study descriptively, I learned interacted with faculty less frequently in things like research and creative projects. And so by paying students to interact with faculty in these ways, we not only provide students with much needed financial support, but also equip poor and working class students with valuable faculty mentorship, disciplinary skills, and knowledge that would be useful throughout their educational trajectory. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I look forward to any questions or discussion.